Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 577. Narrated by Anas, the people mentioned the fire and the bell, they suggested those as signals to indicate the starting of prayers, and by that they mentioned the Jews and the Christians. Then Bilal was ordered to pronounce Adhaan for the prayer by saying its wordings twice, and for the Iqama, the call for the actual standing for the prayers in rows, by saying its wordings once. Iqama is pronounced when the people are ready for the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 578. Narrated by Ibn Umar, when the Muslims arrived at Medina, they used to assemble for the prayer, and used to guess the time for it. During those days, the practice of Adhaan for the prayers had not been introduced yet. Once they discussed this problem regarding the call for prayer. Some people suggested the use of a bell like the Christians, others proposed a trumpet like the horn used by the Jews, but Umar was the first to suggest that a man should call the people for the prayer, so Allah's apostle ordered Bilal to get up and pronounce the Adhaan for prayers. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 579. Narrated by Anas, Bilal was ordered to repeat the wording of the Adhaan for prayers twice, and to pronounce the wording of the Iqamas once except Kad Kamatis Salad. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 580. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, when the number of Muslims increased they discussed the question as to how to know the time for the prayer by some familiar means. Some suggested that a fire be lit, at the time of the prayer, and others put forward the proposal to ring the bell. Bilal was ordered to pronounce the wording of Adhaan twice and of the Iqama once only. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 581. Narrated by Abu Kilaba, Anas said, Bilal was ordered to pronounce the wording of Adhaan twice and of Iqama once only. The sub-narrator Ismaili said, I mentioned that to Ayub and he added, to that, except Iqama, i.e. Kad Kamata Salat which should be said twice. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 582. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle said, when the Adhaan is pronounced Satan takes to his heels and passes wind with noise during his flight in order not to hear the Adhaan. When the Adhaan is completed he comes back and again takes to his heels when the Iqama is pronounced, and after its completion he returns again till he whispers into the heart of the person, to divert his attention from his prayer, and makes him remember things which he does not recall to his mind before the prayer and that causes him to forget how much he has prayed. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 583. Narrated by Abdul Rahman, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri told my father, I see you liking sheep and the wilderness. So whenever you are with your sheep or in the wilderness and you want to pronounce Adhaan for the prayer, raise your voice in doing so, for whoever hears the Adhaan, whether a human being, a jinn, or any other creature, will be a witness for you on the day of resurrection. Abu said added, I heard it, this narration, from Allah's Apostle. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 584. Narrated by Humayd, Anas bin Malik said, whenever the Prophet went out with us to fight, in Allah's cause, against any nation, he never allowed us to attack till morning, and he would wait and see, if he heard Adhaan he would postpone the attack, and if he did not hear Adhaan he would attack them. Anas added, we reached Khaybar at night, and in the morning when he did not hear the Adhaan for the prayer, he, the Prophet, rode and I rode behind Abi Talha and my foot was touching that of the Prophet. The inhabitants of Khaybar came out with their baskets and spades, and when they saw the Prophet they shouted Muhammad. By Allah, Muhammad, and his army. When Allah's apostle saw them, he said, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Khaybar is ruined. Whenever we approach a hostile nation, to fight, then evil will be the morning of those who have been warned. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 585. Narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Allah's Apostle said, whenever you hear the Adhaan, say what the mu'adhin is saying. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 586. Narrated by Isa bin Talha, that he had heard Muawiyah repeating the words of Adhaan up to wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and I testify that Muhammad is Allah's Apostle. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 587. Narrated by Yahya as above, 586, and added, some of my companions told me that Hisham had said, when the mu'adhin said, Ya ulas salah, come for the prayer. Muawiyah said, La hawla wala quwwata illa billah, there is neither might nor any power except with Allah, and added, we heard your Prophet saying the same. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 588. Narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah, Allah's Apostle said, whoever after listening to the Adhaan says, Allahumma rabba hadhahidida wadi tamadi was salatil qa'imati, ati Muhammadan alway salata wal fadilata, wabathu makaman mamudani el ladi wa atahu, O Allah, Lord of this perfect call, of not ascribing partners to you, and of the regular prayer which is going to be established. Kindly give Muhammad the right of intercession and superiority and send him, on the day of judgment, to the best and the highest place in paradise which you promised him, then intercession for me will be permitted for him on the day of resurrection. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 589. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, if the people knew the reward for pronouncing the Adhaan and for standing in the first row, in congregational prayers, and found no other way to get that except by drawing lots, they would draw lots, and if they knew the reward of the Zuhr prayer, in the early moments of its stated time, they would race for it, go early, and if they knew the reward of Isha and Fajr, morning, prayers in congregation, they would come to offer them even if they had to crawl. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 590. Narrated by Abdullah bin al-Harith, once on a rainy muddy day, Ibn Abbas delivered a sermon in our presence, and when the mu'adhin pronounced the Adhaan and said, Ya Allah salah, come for the prayer, Ibn Abbas ordered him to say pray at your homes. The people began to look at each other, surprisingly. Ibn Abbas said, it was done by one who was much better than I, i.e. the Prophet or his mu'adhin, and it is a license. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 591. Narrated by Salim bin Abdullah, my father said that Allah's Apostle said, Bilal pronounces Adhaan at night, so keep on eating and drinking, suhur, till Ibn Maktum pronounces Adhaan. Salim added, he was a blind man who would not pronounce the Adhaan unless he was told that the day had dawned. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 592. Narrated by Hafsa, when the mu'adhin pronounced the Adhaan for Fajr prayer and the dawn became evident, the Prophet ordered a 2-rakat light prayer, sunnah, before the iqamah of the compulsory, congregational, prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 593. Narrated by Aisha, the Prophet used to offer 2 light rakat between the Adhaan and the iqamah of the Fajr prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 594. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's Apostle said, Bilal pronounces the Adhaan at night, so keep on eating and drinking, suhur, till Ibn Maktum pronounces the Adhaan. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 595. Narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'udi, the Prophet said, the Adhaan pronounced by Bilal should not stop you from taking suhoor, for he pronounces the Adhaan at night, so that the one offering the late night prayer, tahajjud, from among you might hurry up and the sleeping from among you might wake up. It does not mean that dawn or morning has started. Then he, the Prophet, pointed with his fingers and raised them up, towards the sky, and then lowered them, towards the earth, like this. Ibn Mas'udi imitated the gesture of the Prophet. Az-Zuhri gestured with his two index fingers which he put on each other and then stretched them to the right and left. These gestures illustrate the way real dawn appears. It spreads left and right horizontally. The dawn that appears in the high sky and lowers down is not the real dawn. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 596. Narrated by Aisha, the Prophet said, Bilal pronounces the Adhaan at night, so eat and drink, suhoor, till Ibn Maktum pronounces the Adhaan. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 597. Narrated by Abdullah bin Mughaffal al-Muzani, Allah's Apostle said thrice, there is a prayer between the two Adhans, Adhaan and Iqama, and added, for the one who wants to pray. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 598. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, when the Mu'adhin pronounced the Adhaan, some of the companions of the Prophet would proceed to the pillars of the mosque, for the prayer, till the Prophet arrived, and in this way they used to pray 2 rakat before the Maghrib prayer. There used to be a little time between the Adhaan and the Iqama. Shubi'ah said, there used to be a very short interval between the two, Adhaan and Iqama. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 599. Narrated by Aisha, Allah's Apostle used to pray 2 light rakat before the morning, compulsory, prayer after the day dawned and the Mu'adhin had finished his Adhaan. He then would lie on his right side till the Mu'adhin came to pronounce the Iqama. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 600. Narrated by Abdullah bin Mughaffal, the Prophet said, there is a prayer between the two Adhans, Adhaan and Iqama, there is a prayer between the two Adhans. And then while saying it the 3rd time he added, for the one who wants to pray. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 601. Narrated by Malik bin Huwairth, I came to the Prophet with some men from my tribe and stayed with him for 20 nights. He was kind and merciful to us. When he realized our longing for our families, he said to us, go back and stay with your families and teach them the religion, and offer the prayer, and one of you should pronounce the Adhaan for the prayer when its time is due, and the oldest one amongst you should lead the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 602. Narrated by Abu Dhar, we were in the company of the Prophet on a journey, and the Mu'adhin wanted to pronounce the Adhaan for the Zuhr prayer. The Prophet said to him, let it become cooler. Then he again wanted to pronounce the Adhaan, but the Prophet said to him, let it become cooler. The Mu'adhin again wanted to pronounce the Adhaan for the prayer. But the Prophet said, let it become cooler, till the shadows of the hillocks become equal to their sizes. The Prophet added, the severity of the heat is from the raging of hell. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 603. Narrated by Malik bin Huwairth, 2 men came to the Prophet with the intention of a journey. The Prophet said, when both of you set out, pronounce Adhaan and then Iqama, and the oldest of you should lead the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 604. Narrated by Malik, we came to the Prophet and stayed with him for 20 days and nights. We were all young and of about the same age. The Prophet was very kind and merciful. When he realized our longing for our families, he asked about our homes and the people there, and we told him. Then he asked us to go back to our families and stay with them and teach them the religion, and to order them to do good things. He also mentioned some other things which I have remembered or forgotten. The Prophet then added, "Pray as you have seen me praying, and when it is the time for the prayer, one of you should pronounce the Adhaan and the oldest of you should lead the prayer." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 605. Narrated by Nafi, once in a cold night, Ibn Umar pronounced the Adhaan for the prayer at Dajanan, the name of a mountain, and then said, "Pray at your homes," and informed us that Allah's apostle used to tell the muaddin to pronounce Adhaan and say, "Pray at your homes" at the end of the Adhaan on a rainy or a very cold night during the journey. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 606. Narrated by On bin Abi Juhayfa, my father said, I saw Allah's apostle at a place called Al-Abta. Bilal came and informed him about the prayer, and then came out with an ansa and planted it in front of Allah's apostle at Al-Abta and pronounced the Iqama. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 607. Narrated by On bin Abi Juhayfa, my father said, I saw Bilal turning his face from side to side while pronouncing the Adhaan for the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 608. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abi Qatada, my father said, while we were praying with the Prophet, he heard the noise of some people. After the prayer he said, "What is the matter?" They replied, "We were hurrying for the prayer." He said, "Do not make haste for the prayer, and whenever you come for the prayer, you should come with calmness, and pray whatever you get, with the people, and complete the rest which you have missed." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 609. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, when you hear the Iqama, proceed to offer the prayer with calmness and solemnity, and do not make haste. And pray whatever you are able to pray, and complete whatever you have missed. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 610. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abi Qatada, my father said, Allah's apostle said, if the Iqama is pronounced, then do not stand for the prayer till you see me in front of you. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 611. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abi Qatada, my father said, Allah's apostle said, if the Iqama is pronounced, then do not stand for the prayer till you see me in front of you, and do it calmly. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 612. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's apostle went out of the mosque when the Iqama had been pronounced and the rows straightened. The Prophet stood at his musalla, praying place, and we waited for the Prophet to begin the prayer with takbir. He left and asked us to remain in our places. We kept on standing till the Prophet returned and the water was trickling from his head, for he had taken a bath of janaba. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 613. Narrated by Abu Huraira, once Iqama was pronounced and the people had straightened the rows, Allah's apostle went forward to lead the prayer, but he was junub, so he said, remain in your places. And he went out, took a bath and returned with water trickling from his head. Then he led the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 614. Narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah, on the day of Al-Kandak, the trench, Umar bin al-Khattab went to the Prophet and said, O Allah's apostle! By Allah, I could not pray, the asr, till the sun had set. Umar told this to the Prophet at the time when a fasting person had done iftar, taken his meals. The Prophet then went to Buthan and I was with him. He performed ablution and offered the asr prayer after the sun had set and then the Maghrib prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 615. Narrated by Anas, once the Iqamah was pronounced and the Prophet was talking to a man, in a low voice, in a corner of the mosque and he did not lead the prayer till, some of, the people had slept, dozed in a sitting posture. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 616. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, once Iqamah was pronounced a man came to the Prophet and detained him, from the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 617. Narrated by Abu Hurairah, Allah's Apostle said, by him in whose hand my soul is I was about to order for collecting firewood, fuel, and then order someone to pronounce the Adhaan for the prayer and then order someone to lead the prayer, then I would go from behind and burn the houses of men who did not present themselves for the compulsory congregational prayer. By him, in whose hands my soul is, if any one of them had known that he would get a bone covered with good meat or two small pieces of meat present in between two ribs, he would have turned up for the Isha prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 618. Narrated by Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's Apostle said, the prayer in congregation is 27 times superior to the prayer offered by person alone. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 619. Narrated by Abu Said al-Khudri, the Prophet said, the prayer in congregation is 25 times superior to the prayer offered by person alone. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 620. Narrated by Abu Hurairah, Allah's Apostle said, the reward of the prayer offered by a person in congregation is 25 times greater than that of the prayer offered in one's house or in the market, alone. And this is because if he performs ablution and does it perfectly and then proceeds to the mosque with the sole intention of praying, then for every step he takes towards the mosque, he is upgraded 1 degree in reward and his one sin is taken off, crossed out, from his accounts of deeds. When he offers his prayer, the angels keep on asking Allah's blessings and Allah's forgiveness for him as long as he is staying at his musalla. They say, O Allah, bestow your blessings upon him, be merciful and kind to him. And one is regarded in prayer as long as one is waiting for the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 621. Narrated by Abu Salama bin Abdurrahman, Abu Hurairah said, I heard Allah's Apostle saying, the reward of a prayer in congregation is 25 times greater than that of a prayer offered by a person alone. The angels of the night and the angels of the day gather at the time of Fajr prayer. Abu Hurairah then added, recite the holy book if you wish, for indeed, the recitation of the Quran in the early dawn, Fajr prayer, is ever witnessed. 17.18. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, the reward of the congregational prayer is 27 times greater than that of the prayer offered by a person alone. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 622. Narrated by Salim, I heard ad-Darda saying, Abu ad-Darda entered the house in an angry mood. I said to him, what makes you angry? He replied, by Allah, I do not find the followers of Muhammad doing those good things, which they used to do before, except the offering of congregational prayer. This happened in the last days of Abu ad-Darda during the rule of Uthman. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 623. Narrated by Abu Musa, The Prophet said, the people who get tremendous reward for the prayer are those who are farthest away from the mosque, and then those who are next farthest, and so on. Similarly, one who waits to pray with the Imam has greater reward than one who prays and goes to bed. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 624. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, while a man was going on a way, he saw a thorny branch and removed it from the way, and Allah became pleased by his action and forgave him for that. Then the Prophet said, 5 are martyrs, one who dies of plague, one who dies of an abdominal disease, one who dies of drowning, one who is buried alive, and dies, and one who is killed in Allah's cause. The Prophet further said, if the people knew the reward for pronouncing the Adhaan and for standing in the first row, in the congregational prayer, and found no other way to get it except by drawing lots, they would do so, and if they knew the reward of offering the Zuhr prayer early, in its stated time, they would race for it, and they knew the reward for Isha and Fajr prayers in congregation, they would attend them even if they were to crawl. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 625. Narrated by Humayd, Anas said, the Prophet said, O Bani Salima, don't you think that for every step of yours, that you take towards the mosque, there is a reward, while coming for prayer? Mujahid said, regarding Allah's statement, we record that which they have sent before them, and their traces, 36.12. Their traces means their steps. And Anas said that the people of Bani Salima wanted to shift to a place near the Prophet, but Allah's Apostle disliked the idea of leaving their houses uninhabited and said, don't you think that you will get the reward for your footprints? Mujahid said, their footprints mean their footsteps, and their going on foot. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 626. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, no prayer is harder for the hypocrites than the Fajr and the Isha prayers, and if they knew the reward for these prayers at their respective times, they would certainly present themselves in the mosques, even if they had to crawl. The Prophet added, certainly I decided to order the muadhin, call maker, to pronounce Iqama and order a man to lead the prayer, and then take a fire flame to burn all those who had not left their houses so far for the prayer along with their houses. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 627. Narrated by Malik bin Huwayrith, Prophet said, to 2 persons, whenever the prayer time becomes due, you should pronounce Adhaan and then Iqama, and the older of you should lead the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 628. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, the angels keep on asking for Allah's blessing and forgiveness for any one of you as long as he is at his musalla, praying place, and does not do hadith, passes wind. The angels say, O Allah, forgive him and be merciful to him. Each one of you is in the prayer as long as he is waiting for the prayer, and nothing but the prayer detains him from going to his family. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 629. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, Allah will give shade to 7 on the day when there will be no shade but his. These 7 persons are, a just ruler, a youth who has been brought up in the worship of Allah, i.e. worships Allah sincerely from childhood, a man whose heart is attached to the mosques, i.e. to pray the compulsory prayers in the mosque in congregation, 2 persons who love each other only for Allah's sake and they meet and part in Allah's cause only, a man who refuses the call of a charming woman of noble birth for illicit intercourse with her and says, I am afraid of Allah, a man who gives charitable gifts so secretly that his left hand does not know what his right hand has given, i.e. nobody knows how much he has given in charity, and a person who remembers Allah in seclusion and his eyes are then flooded with tears. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 630. Narrated by Humayd, Anas was asked, "Did Allah's apostle wear a ring?" He said, "Yes." Once he delayed the Isha prayer till midnight, and after the prayer, he faced us and said, "The people prayed and have slept, and you remained in prayer as long as you waited for it." Anas added, "As if I were just now observing the glitter of his ring." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 631. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, "Allah will prepare for him who goes to the mosque, every morning and in the afternoon, for the congregational prayer, an honorable place in paradise with good hospitality for what he has done, every morning and afternoon goings." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 632. Narrated by Malik ibn Buaina, Allah's apostle passed by a man praying 2 rakat after the Iqamah had been pronounced. When Allah's apostle completed the prayer, the people gathered around him. The Prophet, or that man and Allah's apostle said to him, protesting, "Are there 4 rakat in Fajr prayer? Are there 4 rakat in Fajr prayer?" Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 633. Narrated by Al-Aswad, we were with Aisha discussing the regularity of offering the prayer and dignifying it. She said, when Allah's apostle fell sick with the fatal illness and when the time of prayer became due and Adhaan was pronounced, he said, "Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in prayer." He was told that Abu Bakr was a soft-hearted man and would not be able to lead the prayer in his place. The Prophet gave the same order again, but he was given the same reply. He gave the order for the 3rd time and said, "You, women, are the companions of Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the prayer." So Abu Bakr came out to lead the prayer. In the meantime the condition of the Prophet improved a bit and he came out with the help of 2 men, one on each side. As if I was observing his legs dragging on the ground owing to the disease. Abu Bakr wanted to retreat, but the Prophet beckoned him to remain at his place, and the Prophet was brought till he sat beside Abu Bakr. Al-Amash was asked, was the Prophet praying and Abu Bakr following him, and were the people following Abu Bakr in that prayer? Al-Amash replied in the affirmative with a nod of his head. Abu Muawiyah said, the Prophet was sitting on the left side of Abu Bakr, who was praying while standing. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 634. Narrated by Aisha, when the Prophet became seriously ill and his disease became aggravated, he asked for permission from his wives to be nursed in my house, and he was allowed. He came out with the help of 2 men and his legs were dragging on the ground. He was between Al-Abbas and another man. Ubaydullah said, I told Ibn Abbas what Aisha had narrated, and he said, "Do you know who was the 2nd man whose name Aisha did not mention?" I said, "No." Ibn Abbas said, "He was Ali ibn Abi Talib." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 635. Narrated by Nafi, once on a very cold and stormy night, Ibn Umar pronounced the Adhaan for the prayer and then said, "Pray in your homes." He, Ibn Umar, added, on very cold and rainy nights Allah's apostle used to order the mu'adhin to say, "Pray in your homes." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 636. Narrated by Mamwide bin Rabi al-Ansari, Itban bin Malik used to lead his people, tribe, in prayer and was a blind man. He said to Allah's apostle, "O Allah's apostle, at times it is dark and flood water is flowing in the valley, and I am blind man, so please pray at a place in my house so that I can take it as a musalla, praying place." So Allah's apostle went to his house and said, "Where do you like me to pray?" Adhaan pointed to a place in his house and Allah's apostle offered the prayer there. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 637. Narrated by Abdullah bin al-Harith, Ibn Abbas addressed us on a rainy and muddy day, and when the Muadhin said, "Come for the prayer," Ibn Abbas ordered him to say, "Pray in your homes." The people began to look at one another with surprise as if they did not like it. Ibn Abbas said, "It seems that you thought ill of it, but no doubt it was done by one who was better than I, i.e. the Prophet. It, the prayer, is a strict order and I dislike to bring you out." Ibn Abbas narrated the same as above, but he said, "I did not like you to make you sinful, in refraining from coming to the mosque, and to come, to the mosque, covered with mud up to the knees." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 638. Narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, a cloud came and it rained till the roof started leaking, and in those days the roof used to be of the branches of date palms. Iqama was pronounced, and I saw Allah's apostles prostrating in water and mud, and even I saw the mark of mud on his forehead. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 639. Narrated by Anas bin Sirin, I heard Anas saying, "A man from Ангիր said to the Prophet, I cannot pray with you, in congregation." He was a very fat man, and he prepared a meal for the Prophet and invited him to his house. He spread out a mat for the Prophet, and washed one of its sides with water, and the Prophet prayed 2 rakat on it. A man from the family of Al-Yarud asked, "Did the Prophet used to pray the duha, forenoon, prayer?" Anas said, "I did not see him praying the duha prayer except on that day." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 640. Narrated by Aisha, the Prophet said, "If supper is served, and iqama is pronounced, one should start with the supper." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 641. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, Allah's apostle said, "If the supper is served, start having it before praying the Maghrib prayer, and do not be hasty in finishing it." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 642. Narrated by Nafi, Ibn Umar said, Allah's apostle said, "If the supper is served for any one of you and the iqama is pronounced, start with the supper and don't be in haste, and carry on eating, till you finish it." If food was served for Ibn Umar and iqama was pronounced, he never came to the prayer till he finished it, i.e. food, in spite of the fact that he heard the recitation of the Quran by the Imam in the prayer. Narrated Ibn Umar, the Prophet said, "If any one of you is having his meals, he should not hurry up till he is satisfied, even if the prayer has been started." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 643. Narrated by Ja'far bin Amr bin Umayyah, my father said, "I saw Allah's apostle eating a piece of meat from the shoulder of a sheep, and he was called for the prayer. He stood up, put down the knife and prayed, but did not perform abludalan." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 644. Narrated by Al-Aswad, that he asked Aisha what did the Prophet used to do in his house. She replied, "He used to keep himself busy serving his family, and when it was the time for prayer he would go for it." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 645. Narrated by Ayyub, Abu Kilaba said, Malik bin Huwayrith came to this mosque of ours and said, "I pray in front of you, and my aim is not to lead the prayer but to show you the way in which the Prophet used to pray." I asked Abu Kilaba, "How did he used to pray?" He replied, "The Prophet used to pray, like this sheikh of ours, and the sheikh used to sit for a while after the prostration, before getting up after the first rak'ah. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 646. Narrated by Abu Musa, the Prophet became sick, and when his disease became aggravated, he said, "Tell Abu Bakr to lead the prayer." Aisha said, "He is a soft-hearted man and would not be able to lead the prayer in your place." The Prophet said again, "Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in prayer." She repeated the same reply, but he said, "Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in prayer. You are the companions of Joseph." So the messenger went to Abu Bakr with that order, and he led the people in prayer in the lifetime of the Prophet. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 647. Narrated by Aisha, the mother of the believers, Allah's apostle in his illness said, "Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in prayer." I said to him, "If Abu Bakr stands in your place, the people would not hear him owing to his excessive weeping. So please order Umar to lead the prayer." Aisha added, "I said to Hafsa, say to him, if Abu Bakr should lead the people in the prayer in your place, the people would not be able to hear him owing to his weeping, so please, order Umar to lead the prayer." Hafsa did so, but Allah's apostle said, "Keep quiet. You are verily the companions of Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer." Hafsa said to Aisha, "I never got anything good from you." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 647. Narrated by Aisha, the mother of the believers, Allah's apostle in his illness said, "Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in prayer." I said to him, "If Abu Bakr stands in your place, the people would not hear him owing to his excessive weeping. So please order Umar to lead the prayer." Aisha added, "I said to Hafsa, say to him, if Abu Bakr should lead the people in the prayer in your place, the people would not be able to hear him owing to his weeping, so please, order Umar to lead the prayer." Hafsa did so, but Allah's apostle said, "Keep quiet. You are verily the companions of Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer." Hafsa said to Aisha, "I never got anything good from you." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 648. Narrated by Azizun, Anas bin Malik al-Ansari, told me, Abu Bakr used to lead the people in prayer during the fatal illness of the Prophet till it was Monday. When the people aligned, in rows, for the prayer, the Prophet lifted the curtain of his house and started looking at us and was standing at that time. His face was glittering, like a page of the Quran, and he smiled cheerfully. We were about to be put to trial for the pleasure of seeing the Prophet. Abu Bakr retreated to join the row as he thought that the Prophet would lead the prayer. The Prophet beckoned us to complete the prayer and he let the curtain fall. On the same day he died. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 649. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet did not come out for 3 days. The people stood for the prayer and Abu Bakr went ahead to lead the prayer. In the meantime, the Prophet caught hold of the curtain and lifted it. When the face of the Prophet appeared, we had never seen a scene more pleasing than the face of the Prophet as it appeared then. The Prophet beckoned to Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer and then let the curtain fall. We did not see him, again, till he died. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 650. Narrated by Hamza bin Abdullah, my father said, when Allah's apostle became seriously ill, he was told about the prayer. He said, "Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer." Aisha said, "Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man and he would be overpowered by his weeping if he recited the Quran." He said to them, "Tell him, Abu Bakr, to lead the prayer." The same reply was given to him. He said again, "Tell him to lead the prayer." women, are the companions of Joseph. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 651. Narrated by Urwa's father, Aisha said, Allah's apostle ordered Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer during his illness, and so he led them in prayer. Urwa, a sub-narrator, added, Allah's apostle felt a bit relieved and came out, and Abu Bakr was leading the people. When Abu Bakr saw the Prophet, he retreated, but the Prophet beckoned him to remain there. Allah's apostle sat beside Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr was following the prayer of Allah's apostle, and the people were following the prayer of Abu Bakr. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 652. Narrated by Sal bin Said as Saed, Allah's apostle went to establish peace among Bani Amr bin Auf. In the meantime the time of prayer was due, and the Muadhin went to Abu Bakr and said, Will you lead the prayer, so that I may pronounce the Iqamah? Abu Bakr replied in the affirmative and led the prayer. Allah's apostle came while the people were still praying, and he entered the rows of the praying people till he stood in the first row. The people clapped their hands. Abu Bakr never glanced sideways in his prayer, but when the people continued clapping, Abu Bakr looked and saw Allah's apostle. Allah's apostle beckoned him to stay at his place. Abu Bakr raised his hands and thanked Allah for that order of Allah's apostle, and then he retreated till he reached the first row. Allah's apostle went forward and led the prayer. When Allah's apostle finished the prayer, he said, O Abu Bakr, what prevented you from staying when I ordered you to do so? Abu Bakr replied, How can I be Kahafa, Abu Bakr, dare to lead the prayer in the presence of Allah's apostle? Then Allah's apostle said, Why did you clap so much? If something happens to anyone during his prayer, he should say Subhanallah. If he says so, he will be attended to, for clapping is for women. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 653. Narrated by Malik bin Huwairth, we went to the Prophet, and we were all young men, and stayed with him for about 20 nights. The Prophet was very merciful. He said, When you return home, impart religious teachings to your families, and tell them to offer perfectly such and such a prayer at such and such a time, and such a prayer at such and such a time. And all the time of the prayer one of you should pronounce the Adhaan, and the oldest of you should lead the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 654. Narrated by Adhaan bin Malik al-Ansari, the Prophet came to my house and asked permission for entering, and I allowed him. He asked, Where do you like me to pray in your house? I pointed to a place which I liked. He stood up for prayer, and we aligned behind him, and he finished the prayer with taslim, and we did the same. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 655. Narrated by Ubaydullah ibn Abdullah bin Utbah, I went to Aisha and asked her to describe to me the illness of Allah's apostle. Aisha said, Yes. The Prophet became seriously ill and asked whether the people had prayed. We replied, No, O Allah's apostle. They are waiting for you. He added, Put water for me in a trough. Aisha added, We did so. He took a bath and tried to get up but fainted. When he recovered, he again asked whether the people had prayed. We said, No, they are waiting for you. O Allah's apostle, he again said, Put water in a trough for me. He sat down and took a bath and tried to get up but fainted again. Then he recovered and said, Have the people prayed? We replied, No, they are waiting for you. O Allah's apostle. He said, Put water for me in the trough. Then he sat down and washed himself and tried to get up, but he fainted. When he recovered, he asked, Have the people prayed? We said, No, they are waiting for you. O Allah's apostle! The people were in the mosque waiting for the Prophet for the Isha prayer. The Prophet sent for Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. The messenger went to Abu Bakr and said, Allah's apostle orders you to lead the people in the prayer. Abu Bakr was a soft-hearted man, so he asked Umar to lead the prayer, but Umar replied, You are more rightful. So Abu Bakr led the prayer in those days. When the Prophet felt a bit better, he came out for the Zuhr prayer with the help of two persons, one of whom was Al-Abbas, while Abu Bakr was leading the people in the prayer. When Abu Bakr saw him, he wanted to retreat, but the Prophet beckoned him not to do so and asked them to make him sit beside Abu Bakr, and they did so. Abu Bakr was following the Prophet in the prayer, and the people were following Abu Bakr. The Prophet prayed, sitting. Ubaydullah added, I went to Abdullah bin Abbas and asked him, Shall I tell you what Aisha has told me about the fatal illness of the Prophet? Ibn Abbas said, Go ahead. I told him her narration, and he did not deny anything of it, but asked whether Aisha told me the name of the second person who helped the Prophet, along with Al-Abbas. I said, No. He said, he was Ali, ibn Abi Talib. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 656. Narrated by Aisha, the mother of the believers, Allah's apostle during his illness prayed at his house while sitting, whereas some people prayed behind him standing. The Prophet beckoned them to sit down. On completion of the prayer, he said, The Imam is to be followed, bow when he bows, raise up your heads, stand erect, when he raises his head, and when he says, Sami Allahu liman hamida, Allah heard those who sent praises to him, say then Rabbana wa laka alhamd, O our Lord. All the praises are for you, and if he prays sitting, then pray sitting. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 657. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, once Allah's apostle rode a horse and fell down, and the right side of his body was injured. He offered one of the prayers while sitting, and we also prayed behind him sitting. When he completed the prayer, he said, The Imam is to be followed. Pray standing if he prays standing, and bow when he bows, rise when he rises, and if he says, Sami Allahu liman hamida, say then, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, and pray standing if he prays standing, and pray sitting, all of you, if he prays sitting. Humayd said, the saying of the Prophet pray sitting, if he, Imam, prays sitting was said in his former illness, during his early life, but the Prophet prayed sitting afterwards, in the last illness, and the people were praying standing behind him, and the Prophet did not order them to sit. We should follow the latest actions of the Prophet. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 658. Narrated by Al-Bara, and he was not a liar, when Allah's apostle said, Sami Allahu liman hamida, none of us bent his back, for prostrations, till the Prophet prostrate, and then we would prostrate after him. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 659. Narrated by Abu Ishaq, as above. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 660. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, Isn't he who raises his head before the Imam afraid that Allah may transform his head into that of a donkey, or his figure, face, into that of a donkey? Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 661. Narrated by Ibn Umar, when the earliest emigrants came to Al-Usba, a place in Cuba, before the arrival of the Prophet Salim, the slave of Abu Hudhaifa, who knew the Quran more than the others, used to lead them in prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 662. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet said, Listen and obey, your chief, even if an Ethiopian whose head is like a raisin were made your chief. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 663. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, if the Imam leads the prayer correctly then he and you will receive the rewards, but if he makes a mistake in the prayer, then you will receive the reward for the prayer and the sin will be his. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 664. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said to Abu Dhar, listen and obey your chief, even if he is an Ethiopian with a head like a raisin. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 665. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, once I passed the night in the house of my aunt Maimuna. Allah's Apostle offered the Isha prayer and then came to the house and offered 4 rakat and slept. Later on, he woke up and stood for the prayer and I stood on his left side. He drew me to his right and prayed 5 rakat and then 2. He then slept till I heard him snoring, or heard his breath sounds. Afterwards he went out for the morning prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 666. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, one night I slept at the house of my aunt Maimuna and the Prophet was there on that night. He performed ablution and stood up for the prayer. I joined him and stood on his left side, but he drew me to his right and prayed 13 rakat and then slept till I heard his breath sounds. And whenever he slept, he used to breathe with audible sounds. The Adhaan came to the Prophet and he went out and prayed the morning prayer, without repeating the ablution. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 667. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, once I passed the night in the house of my aunt Maimuna. The Prophet stood for the night prayer and I joined him and stood on his left side, but he drew me to his right by holding me by the head. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 668. Narrated by Muadh bin Jabal, I used to pray the Isha prayer with the Prophet and then go to lead my people in the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 669. Narrated by Amr, Jabir bin Abdullah said, Muadh bin Jabal used to pray with the Prophet and then go to lead his people in prayer. Once he led the Isha prayer and recited Surat al-Baqarah. Somebody left the prayer and Muadh criticized him. The news reached the Prophet and he said to Muadh, you are putting the people to trial, and repeated it thrice, or said something similar, and ordered him to recite 2 medium surahs of Mufassal. Amr said that he had forgotten the names of those surahs. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 670. Narrated by Abu Mas'ud, a man came and said, O Allah's Apostle, by Allah, I keep away from the morning prayer only because so and so prolongs the prayer when he leads us in it. The narrator said, I never saw Allah's Apostle more furious in giving advice than he was at that time. He then said, some of you make people dislike good deeds, the prayer. So whoever among you leads the people in prayer should shorten it, because among them are the weak, the old, and the needy. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 671. Narrated by Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, if any one of you leads the people in the prayer, he should shorten it, for amongst them are the weak, the sick, and the old, and if anyone among you prays alone then he may prolong the prayer as much as he wishes. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 672. Narrated by Abu Mas'ud, a man came and said, O Allah's Apostle, I keep away from the morning prayer because so and so, Imam, prolongs it too much. Allah's Apostle became furious, and I had never seen him more furious than he was on that day. The Prophet said, O people, Some of you make others dislike the prayer, so whoever becomes an imam he should shorten the prayer, as behind him are the weak, the old, and the needy. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 673. Narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari, once a man was driving two nadihas, camels used for agricultural purposes, and night had fallen. He found Muadh praying, so he made his camel kneel and joined Muadh in the prayer. The latter recited Surat al-Baqarah or Surat an-Nisa, so, the man left the prayer and went away. When he came to know that Muadh had criticized him, he went to the Prophet, and complained against Muadh. The Prophet said thrice, "O Muadh! Are you putting the people to trial? It would have been better if you had recited Saba isma rabbika al-A'la, 87, Wash Shamsi Wajuhaha, 91, or Wal Layli Idha Yaksha, 92, for the old, the weak, and the needy pray behind you." Jabir said that Muadh recited Surah al-Baqarah in the Isha prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 674. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet used to pray a short prayer, in congregation, but used to offer it in a perfect manner. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 675. Narrated by Abdullah bin Abi Qatada, my father said, the Prophet said, when I stand for prayer, I intend to prolong it, but on hearing the cries of a child, I cut it short, as I dislike to trouble the child's mother. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 676. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, I never prayed behind any imam a prayer lighter and more perfect than that behind the Prophet, and he used to cut short the prayer whenever he heard the cries of a child, lest he should put the child's mother to trial. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 677. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, when I start the prayer I intend to prolong it, but on hearing the cries of a child, I cut short the prayer because I know that the cries of the child will incite its mother's passions. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 678. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, whenever I start the prayer I intend to prolong it, but on hearing the cries of a child, I cut short the prayer because I know that the cries of the child will incite its mother's passions. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 679. Narrated by Jabir bin Abdullah, Muadh used to pray with the Prophet and then go and lead his people, tribe, in the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 680. Narrated by Aisha, when the Prophet became ill in his fatal illness, someone came to inform him about the prayer, and the Prophet told him to tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. I said, Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man, and if he stands for the prayer in your place, he would weep and would not be able to recite the Quran. The Prophet said, tell Abu Bakr to lead the prayer. I said the same as before. He repeated the same order, and, on the third or the fourth time he said, you are the companions of Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the prayer. So Abu Bakr led the prayer, and meanwhile the Prophet felt better and came out with the help of two men, as if I see him just now dragging his feet on the ground. When Abu Bakr saw him, he tried to retreat, but the Prophet beckoned him to carry on. Abu Bakr retreated a bit and the Prophet sat on his left side. Abu Bakr was repeating the takbir, Allahu Akbar, of Allah's apostle for the people to hear. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 681. Narrated by Aisha, when Allah's apostle became seriously ill, Bilal came to him for the prayer. He said, Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. I said, O Allah's apostle, Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man, and if he stands in your place, he would not be able to make the people hear him. Will you order Umar to lead the prayer? The Prophet said, Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. Then I said to Hafsa, Tell him, Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man, and if he stands in his place, he would not be able to make the people hear him. Would you order Umar to lead the prayer? Hafsa did so. The Prophet said, Verily you are the companions of Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. So Abu Bakr stood for the prayer. In the meantime Allah's apostle felt better and came out with the help of 2 persons, and both of his legs were dragging on the ground till he entered the mosque. When Abu Bakr heard him coming, he tried to retreat, but Allah's apostle beckoned him to carry on. The Prophet sat on his left side. Abu Bakr was praying while standing, and Allah's apostle was leading the prayer while sitting. Abu Bakr was following the Prophet, and the people were following Abu Bakr in the prayer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 682. Narrated by Abu Huraira, once Allah's apostle prayed 2 rakat, instead of 4, and finished his prayer. Dhul asked him whether the prayer had been reduced or whether he had forgotten. Allah's apostle asked the people whether Dhul was telling the truth. The people replied in the affirmative. Then Allah's apostle stood up, offered the remaining 2 rakat, and then finished his prayer with taslim, and then said, Allahu Akbar. He followed it with 2 prostrations like ordinary prostrations or a bit longer. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 683. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet prayed 2 rakat of Zuhr prayer, instead of 4, and he was told that he had prayed 2 rakat only. Then he prayed 2 more rakat and finished them with the taslim followed by 2 prostrations. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 684. Narrated by Aisha, the mother of the faithful believers, Allah's apostle in his last illness said, Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. I said, If Abu Bakr stood in your place, he would not be able to make the people hear him owing to his weeping. So please order Umar to lead the prayer. He said, Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. I said to Hafsa, Say to him, Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man, and if he stood in your place he would not be able to make the people hear him owing to his weeping. So order Umar to lead the people in the prayer. Hafsa did so, but Allah's apostle said, Keep quiet. Verily you are the companions of Prophet Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. Hafsa said to me, I never got any good from you. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 685. Narrated by An-Nu'man bin Bashir, the Prophet said, Straighten your rows or Allah will alter your faces. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 686. Narrated by Anas, the Prophet said, Straighten your rows, for I see you from behind my back. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 687. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, once the Iqamah was pronounced and Allah's apostle faced us and said, Straighten your rows and stand closer together, for I see you from behind my back. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 688. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, Martyrs are those who die because of drowning, plague, an abdominal disease, or a being buried alive by a falling building. And then he added, if the people knew the reward for the Zuhr prayer in its early time, they would race for it. If they knew the reward for the Isha and the Fajr prayers in congregation, they would join them even if they had to crawl. If they knew the reward for the first row, they would draw lots for it. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 689. Narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, "The Imam is appointed to be followed. So do not differ from him, bow when he bows, and say, Rabbana lakal hamd if he says Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, and if he prostrate after him, and if he prays sitting, pray sitting all together, and straighten the rows for the prayer, as the straightening of the rows is amongst those things which make your prayer a correct and perfect one." See Hadith number 657. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 690. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, "Straighten your rows as the straightening of rows is essential for a perfect and correct prayer." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 691. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, I arrived at Medina and was asked whether I found any change since the days of Allah's Apostle. I said, "I have not found any change except that you do not stand in alignment in your prayers." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 692. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, "Straighten your rows for I see you from behind my back." Anas added, "Every one of us used to put his shoulder with the shoulder of his companion and his foot with the foot of his companion." Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 693. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, I prayed with the Prophet one night and stood on his left side. Allah's Apostle caught hold of my head from behind and drew me to his right and then offered the prayer and slept. Later the Muadhin came and the Prophet stood up for prayer without performing ablution. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 694. Narrated by Anas bin Malik, one night an orphan and I offered the prayers behind the Prophet in my house and my mother, Sulaim, was standing behind us, by herself forming a row. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 695. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, one night I stood to the left of the Prophet in the prayer but he caught hold of me by the hand or by the shoulder, arm, till he made me stand on his right and beckoned with his hand, for me, to go from behind him. Al-Kashmehani Fatha al-Bari. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 696. Narrated by Aisha, Allah's Apostle used to pray in his room at night. As the wall of the room was low, the people saw him and some of them stood up to follow him in the prayer. In the morning they spread the news. The following night the Prophet stood for the prayer and the people followed him. This went on for 2 or 3 nights. Thereupon Allah's Apostle did not stand for the prayer the following night, and did not come out. In the morning, the people asked him about it. He replied, that he was afraid that the night prayer might become compulsory. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 697. Narrated by Aisha, the Prophet had a mat which he used to spread during the day and use as a curtain at night. So a number of people gathered at night facing it and prayed behind him. Sahih Bukhari Volume 1, Book 11, Hadith number 698. Narrated by Zayd bin Thabit, Allah's Apostle made a small room in the month of Ramadan. Said said, I think that Zayd bin Thabit said that it was made of a mat, and he prayed there for a few nights, and so some of his companions prayed behind him. When he came to know about it, he kept on sitting. In the morning, he went out to them and said, I have seen and understood what you did. You should pray in your houses, for the best prayer of a person is that which he prays in his house except the compulsory prayers.